mindfulness, it's about bringing our attention into the present moment. The definition is awareness in the present moment of what's going on non-judgmentally. So we're with whatever's happening as it's happening without any judgment or self-criticism of what our experience is. Most of the time, most of us are somewhere else. We spend a lot of the time as we're doing something. So if you think about having, your morning shower or your breakfast or that, often your attention is somewhere else. You're thinking about what you're going to do later in the day, or you're thinking about something that happened earlier on, or you're going back to other conversations, or you're thinking about events that happened yesterday. You may not be in the present moment. And mindfulness is about living more in the present moment. And I suppose the relevance of this, for anybody who's living with an illness or that, is that a lot of the time our thoughts and mental activity can go right off into the future, into a lot of anxious thoughts, fearful thoughts. What about this? A lot about worrying, playing out different scenarios, that kind of thing. And all of those kinds of anxious thoughts can have a very strong effect on our stress system, on making it can help us to feel very stressed a lot of the time. So mindfulness has a real role to play for most of us in modern day society, because our lives are very fast, a lot going on, a lot of pressure. But for anybody who's living with an illness, it has a huge role in helping to work with the way our thoughts can kind of proliferate in terms of anxiety and fear and all kinds of worry. And obviously anything that's good for reducing stress is good for our health. So that's really what mindfulness is. That's how it is. How it looks like for us would be, many of us would have had moments of being very present. If you think about something like your team scoring a goal and you're absolutely there, you were so in the moment. Maybe the birth of a child, again, you weren't thinking about what you were going to have for your lunch or your dinner. You were there in that moment with this small infant in your arms. Sometimes it's nature that brings us very much into the present moment. We see a beautiful sunset, or we hear a bird sing, and we're just there in that moment. But most of the time, for most of us, we're not in the present, we're somewhere else. And a lot of the time, we're either going back over things from the past, and that's called rehashing, so going over things that may have happened, or how we'd have liked them to have happened, the way we wanted it to be, or we're going forward into the future and thinking about what might happen or how we would like it to happen or the way that we want. So when that happens, we're not in the present moment, and we lose out on this moment and on living this, whatever's happening, very fully in the now. So it is a form of training the attention to come back into the present moment, to be right here, right now, with whatever's going on. I suppose one of the things is that often when we are going over things either that have already happened or that may happen in the future, our thoughts can have a kind of an anxious pattern to them. We tend to have a slightly negative spin. We don't seem to go over and over all the happy things or the delightful things. We tend to refocus on the things that we'd have liked to have been different, or the ways that we might like it to be different in the future. So what that can do is that we get caught up in these cycles of playing out these worrying thoughts that are called rumination. And rumination scientifically has been shown to play quite a big effect in the role of anxiety and low mood and depression. So it can be really helpful if we can have tools to bring ourselves back to the present moment, to be more in the now, to keep our minds focused just right now with whatever's going on now. So that's what mindfulness has to offer. There's been a huge amount of research conducted over the last 30 years on mindfulness because it came into the health service in the States about 30 years ago. And there's been a lot of scientific studies done looking at the benefits of mindfulness, and it has been shown in many studies to have effects on lowering stress, lowering anxiety, improving mood for people who are depressed. There's a very strong correlation with improvement in immunity, improved sleep. I'm sure some of you have had nights where you've tried to go to sleep and there have been thoughts going over and over in your head, thinking about certain things, playing out things in your mind. And those, when you're doing that, when you're playing out worries or thoughts in your mind, that is going to both activate the stress response, but it's also going to keep you wide awake because the stress hormones are coming into your body. So it's really important to be able to let go of thoughts, to have some kind of tools to let go of the habits of the mind, to get caught up in negative thoughts or worries and that. So mindfulness, a lot of people use mindfulness to help them to get off to sleep. Perhaps, some of you are already feeling sleepy from the little practice that we did earlier on. It's not really what it's designed for. Often we talk about falling awake with mindfulness, but if you can let go of worrying thoughts at night time, it can be really helpful to help you to finally drift off to sleep. So those would be some of the benefits of practicing mindfulness. And then what we might look at now is how could we be more mindful in our lives? Is it, mindfulness can be a practice like a meditation, but it's also possible to be more mindful in our lives as we go about our day. So some of the tools or the suggestions that you can do, and these are on a handout for you, is just to, as you go about your day, to come back to the breath. Often we use the breath in mindfulness a lot because you can only breathe the breath of this moment. You can't breathe yesterday's breath, or you can't breathe tomorrow's breath. So often the breath can be a really helpful tool and anchor to bring us back into the present moment. And often what happens is if we're worried or stressed or caught up in thoughts, is that the breath actually closes down, it gets very shallow. So if you can actually bring your attention to your breath, you can start to breathe a little bit deeper. And what happens when you do that is that you're actually counterbalancing the stress response. You're actually giving your body a signal, okay, I don't have to be worried here. I'm okay. She's breathing deeply. It usually sends the body's stress response the message that the alarm signal can be counterbalanced. So if you think of it this way, if you'd like to make it just a tight fist, and often this is what happens when we're worried about something or when we're preoccupied or that, it's like the body gets tight, the mind can get tight, and as you're holding your fist tight, just notice what happens to the breath. it also closes down, doesn't it? It gets a bit kind of held and tight here. And if you can just imagine breathing a little deeper, inhaling with awareness, exhaling, what does the hand want to do? Wants to open. Wants to open. So that's the same. If we can actually bring our attention to taking deeper breaths, even as we go through our day, you're actually giving your body a signal to just soften a little bit, to relax a little bit. So one of the suggestions would be that if you can, take 3 mindful breaths as you go through your day, and you can link that activity to something like before you turn the ignition in the car, just stopping, taking 3 breaths, breathing in and breathing out, breathing in and breathing out. And once more, breathing in and breathing out. You can do it maybe before you press the send button on an email, just stopping and taking 3 mindful breaths. Before you answer your phone, taking 3 mindful breaths. Before you open the door after a busy day at work, just stopping in the car, taking 3 breaths. It's just a way of bringing more mindfulness into your day. And it's also a kind of a self-calming technique. Whether you ever learn mindfulness or do any more about mindfulness, just taking 3 mindful breaths can be, it's like a mini practice to help you to come back. A lot of people who I teach mindfulness to in ARC use the short practices like the mindful breathing when they're going for their appointments, perhaps when they're meeting their consultant or when they're going for scans or checkups. High stress times when the anxiety might be very raised, when there's a lot going on in your head. Anything that you can do to self-regulate, to calm, to bring yourself back into the present moment can be really helpful. So a lot of people use these short mindfulness practices to support them at times around trips to hospital or interventions. So there are other ways also of bringing mindfulness into our lives, and that would be of actually being present as we're doing something. So I mentioned earlier on about, if we're having a shower or we're eating our breakfast, often our thoughts are elsewhere. So if you can actually just give your attention, so that when you're in the shower, actually feeling the water on your skin, feeling the contact as you put the shower gel on, staying connected to the breath, and rather than thinking ahead into the day, or when you're eating a meal, something like your breakfast or having a cup of tea, giving it your full attention. Again, oftentimes, you might have your dinner or your lunch and you kind of say, well, what was that? What did I have there? Or, it's like you weren't present. You just kind of swallowed it quite quickly. But if you can bring your attention back and just really be in the present moment. So what are the flavors I'm tasting here? What am I smelling? What does it look like? Am I enjoying this? Just being present. These are ways, any routine activity, giving it your full attention. Even the drive to work or your drive home this evening, just really paying attention to it. They're all ways of living more mindfully. I'm just wondering, is there any questions that anybody would like to ask about it, about the practice, about mindfulness in general?
You said before, has anyone done a course? How long would the courses generally run for if you were to do a mindfulness course?
With mindfulness, there's been so much in the media about mindfulness, and there's a lot, And there's a lot of people who are teaching mindfulness courses who've maybe just done a short course themselves. But the courses that have all the medical benefits, I'm going to talk a bit more about the evidence that's in relation to mindfulness, but they're 8-week courses. They're called mindfulness-based stress reduction courses or mindfulness-based cognitive therapy courses. So they're normally 8 weeks. Classes are about 2.5 hours in length. It's quite an intensive training, because what you're doing in that, and all of the courses, people would be encouraged to be doing 45 minutes at home every day. You're actually training your mind to come back. So that's what a mindfulness course is. It's like it's this intensive training of your attention. It's like going to the gym to build muscle or to increase your tone. Mindfulness is a training of the mind, and you're trying to build your attentional muscle. So it's like with mindfulness, as you get more experienced in it, you can actually direct where your thoughts go. So you notice, oh, I'm getting really caught up in worrying about X and Y, or I'm going back to that scenario that happened last week again, and I've been thinking about that so much. You actually notice that you're going over and over something, and you'll bring yourself back. And what ultimately happens is that you stop those patterns of rehearsing or rehashing, or they significantly reduce. So it's a training of attention, and it normally takes, most courses would be about 8 weeks. Anything else for anybody? Any other questions about it? Okay. Just something that's very, very recent and very relevant. In Britain, the Houses of Parliament, they had a parliamentary party to investigate the use of mindfulness and the relevance of mindfulness. As part of it, 115 parliamentarians took part in mindfulness training, and they made recommendations to the government in a report called Mindful Nation. This was just released in October last, just a few weeks ago. And I'm just going to read out some of the report, which is that one of the most important areas of research has been of mindfulness-based interventions and the treatment of long-term physical health conditions. A recent review of 114 studies found consistent improvements in mental health and well-being, notably reduced stress, anxiety and depression in the context of poor physical health. And in terms of specific physical health conditions, the strongest evidence presented is for the psychological impact of living with cancer, where 43 studies, including 9 randomized control trials, are described. So the recommendations of this parliamentary party to the government in England is that mindfulness programs are rolled out, and one of the main areas where they want to see it rolled out is for people who are living with cancer. Now, whether that ever gets implemented, we don't know. Hopefully it would. But they're saying that there is a very strong evidence to support that mindfulness training helps people who are living with ongoing health problems. This is just something very recent. There is actually over 30 years of research that show that mindfulness is helpful. There's been a lot of research into mindfulness for people who have been living with cancer, and some of those studies show that there is very significant reductions in stress, in mood, quality of life. There's an improvement in immunity. Sleep disturbance is improved for people who have had cancer diagnosis. There's been lots of studies, so there's a lot of evidence to support that it is a very useful tool for anybody, for for many physical conditions, but it certainly has a huge relevance. And what I would see in my work with people in ARC is that it helps people to live better. It helps them to manage their illness better, manage their anxiety, and to take care of themselves in terms of their stress and their well-being, their energy, to take care of themselves when they're after having treatment, when, you know, they might feel that they should be pushing themselves or making themselves get up and get on with it. It helps them to kind of self-regulate and to monitor their energy and to take care of themselves a little bit better. I have a quote here from somebody who did a mindfulness course. So they say, "I feel it has helped me cope with the uncertainty and stress that comes with the secondary cancer diagnosis. With cancer, you lose a lot of control over your life. This mindfulness course has taught me I have control over my mind. I can observe any negative thoughts without letting them control me." So I'm going to finish with another mindfulness practice. This is a meditation practice.
Sorry, just before we move on, would you recommend the various apps that give you like 3-minute meditation or 6-minute, those type of things?
They're great, and they're great if you want to kind of see, rather than kind of plunge into an 8-week course, and sometimes they can be, you know, sometimes you'll get courses in cancer support centres that, you know, are free and that, but, you know, I know some of you aren't, you know, might be living in rural locations and you might not have access to mindfulness courses. So getting an app for your phone or getting a book that has recordings or going online, it can be a really helpful way to see whether it's for you or not, whether, you know, you feel that it might help you. And on the handout there's a list of some books and some apps and some websites that you might like to check out and to see, you know, just to try it. A lot of the books that are out now have come with either CDs or audio downloads with mindfulness practices, so that you can actually try them at home, and then you might see whether doing the course would have something to offer. So yeah, it's a good way. It's a really good way to get started. But it's also worth checking out if you're living somewhere near any of the cancer support centres. A lot of them run mindfulness introductory classes or drop-in classes. Some of them, not many, run the 8-week programs, but often it's a good idea to start off with an introductory class.